Now Sweeney, Dwayne Sweeney! Sweeney's over!
Can you please hand it over to your captain, Dwayne Sweeney?
Welcome to Real Tales with Sweens, proudly brought to you by Fish City Hamilton. Fish City has been servicing the Waikato's fishing, boating and outdoor needs for over 30 years. Now, with the help of their online store, their great range of products and outstanding customer service are available across New Zealand. This episode, I catch up with Scott Malcon. Scott has been a big part of the resurgence of the fishing brand Daiwa here in New Zealand. During this podcast, we get some great insight to the brand that is Daiwa New Zealand and how strong Scotty's passion for fishing really is. We cover a range of topics from starting out working for Fish City, the development of products and how the team at Daiwa go about producing gear to suit our fishery here in New Zealand. We also discuss having to make collect phone calls from Great Barrier Island after being caught out in bad weather, his earliest memories of fishing with Rick Pollock aboard Pursuit, the cultural shift that they have made at Daiwa, and so much more. As always, the show notes will be available on the Real Tales with Sweens Instagram and Facebook pages, as well as the website realtaleswithsweens.com. Good George have a 15% discount available for all you listeners. Just use the discount code REALTALES before checking out of their online store. The link to their store is also available on the realtaleswithsweens.com homepage. I would like to pay my respects to the families and friends of the 5 anglers that tragically lost their lives when the fishing vessel Enchanter sank on the 20th of March 2022. This podcast was recorded prior to the tragic event, and Scott mentions his time aboard Enchanter, and I understand that might be sensitive to some listeners. Lastly, I want to say a special thank you to Scotty for coming down and sharing his tale with us. I can't wait to get out for a fish together, bro. So join me as we get to know Scott Malcon. Enjoy the podcast. It's Malcon, eh? Is that how you pronounce it?
M-A-L-C-O-N.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit
Malcon,
different.
not Malcolm.
Yeah.
Do people call you Malcolm?
No. People I just give up half the time.
Yeah. Cool.
M-A-L-C-O-N for November.
Yeah.
Oh.
Malcolm.
M-A-L-C-O-N. No, N.
Yeah.
I think originally it was like Italian, Malconi maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But like all of us in New Zealand, like we're all tabby cats, eh?
We are, eh?
Yeah.
Pretty mixed bunch. Cool. All right. So I'm just sitting here with Scott Malcon. Thank you very much for making the trip down, Scotty, down to the beautiful Hamilton. We're just sitting in the Raglan Roast studio, so there might be a little bit of background traffic noise, but a few of the listeners seem to like that. It makes it feel more natural. But yeah, first of all, thank you for coming down, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Braved the Auckland traffic.
Yeah, nice. Cool. So for those of you that don't know Scotty, Scotty is the fishing manager, or as we sort of spoke about off air, which is effectively the brand manager for Daiwa, based here in New Zealand. So yeah, with this podcast, we're gonna go kind of everywhere with it and get a really good sort of in-depth background knowledge to the brand, but then also with you as well, Scotty, and what fishing is to you and what it, I suppose like many of us, how much passion we find in that.
Yeah, cool. Now looking forward to it.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll be pretty keen to start off. We'll start, I guess right at the start. Fishing for you, where did that come from? So most of us, it came from, that's what Dad did, and we kind of followed suit.
Yeah, 100%. From probably 3 years old, Dad would have us have me in the dinghy off Browns Bay, and we'd be out catching snapper, and it's some of your earliest, fondest memories, with Dad out on the boat fishing. And then from there, I guess just the love for fishing, just continued and snowballed into what it is today. But growing up through primary school and intermediate school holidays, I'd be getting my nana to drop me down at the rocks, or getting mum to drop me off at Lake Pupuki on her way to work, and I'd fish all day and then get picked up in the afternoon, and I guess from there I never lost the passion for it through my teenage years, and eventually it became work which, I'm sort of pretty fortunate of where it's brought me to today.
Yeah. And I think that is like a big part for a lot of us is we have good access to fishing here in New Zealand. Like we're in, or I suppose we're smack bang in the middle of the North Island really here where we are in Hamilton, and it's an hour and a half one way to the coast, and then it's only about 45 minutes to the other coast on the other side. So that accessibility, and then we've got the rivers, we've got lakes and the rest of it. So it kind of lends itself to the passion of fishing.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. There wouldn't be many places in New Zealand that you don't have somewhere within probably 15, 20 minutes you can't go and with a line and catch some sort of fish, even if it's an eel from a culvert or a coarse fish from a lake, or if you're fortunate to live close to the coast, fishing's just so readily accessible for everyone. It's good.
Yeah, no, it is pretty cool. Just on that, like I did have a few sort of people reach out when they knew that you were coming on the podcast, and they were pretty keen to hear, I guess, some of the adventures and things that you had learnt. And then, just talking off air before, working on Enchanter, having a go at being a deckhand, and how did you find that?
Yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener. I was working in a tackle shop at the time, and probably like a lot of people in their young 20s, I spent a lot of time fishing on pursuit with Rick, and I kind of had that idea that a dickie, could be for me. And fortunately, Rick teed it up with Lance on Enchanter that, I could go and do a trip and see if I liked it. And headed up to the far north. I think I got Mum to drop me off at Monganui Wharf. And then, jumped on the boat, and we had 3 guys. I forget where they were from. They're from down the line. They were farmers. So it was quite an easy trip. I think that boat can take up to 8 people. So we had 3. So it was I think Lance reminded me that it's a pretty easy introduction into the deckhanding side of things. But yeah, it was it was probably a bit of an eye opener being on that side of the fence as opposed to being the one fishing as such. It's hats off to all the boys that have done the hard yards decking. It's hard graft, and I really enjoyed the experience. We caught some awesome fish, plenty of marlins, some nice kingies, heaps of bottom fish. But ultimately for me, I think Lance said it to me, I'd leadered a marlin or a couple of marlin. He's like, this is what the boys live for, leadering these fish. And I was like, I probably personally prefer to be the one catching them. So long story short, worked out that the decking probably wasn't for me. My goal was to, stay involved in fishing and be that guy on the rod catching the fish, and that's really where my passion lied.
Yeah, nice. Cool. You mentioned him there, but Rick Pollock. So just released an episode with Rick, and it's gone gangbusters, and everyone loves it. And he's got so many awesome tales, and you mentioned it too. If the fishing's good, that's awesome. But then if it's not, he's just got so many, I suppose, such good conversation and so many tales that he can tell.
Yeah, I think I was listening to the podcast on the way down, and if anyone hasn't listened to it, lock it in and book it in and sit back for 4 hours because it's a great listen. And yeah, I think I fished with Rick maybe when I was about 17 or 18 first, and it was a real eye opener. Like my first time kingy fishing, we ended up at the Rangatira Knolls. Like the biggest fish was like 37 kilos, and I don't think I landed a kingy. Yeah. It was like. And I think at one stage Rick said to me, he's like, in his American accent, he's like, Scotty, just go and sit down. And I was like, oh man, this is a lot. I'd never hooked a massive kingy before, and these were, just absolute beasts, And then from that point on, it kind of just, it probably lit a fire in me, like, man, I'm not going to be that guy again that just goes and gets his ass handed to him. But, that trip for me, that probably lit a real fire on that kingy fishing side of things. But in terms of fishing with Rick, you won't find anyone more knowledgeable, just an outright gentleman. And even if the fishing's rubbish, his banter and his stories, you you could sit around a campfire with Rick and listen to him spin yarns all night long, So, it's he's a great dude.
Yeah, and something about being on the ocean, and the more days you spend on it, just the stories that come out of it, Like I'd spend minimal in comparison to someone like Rick and probably even yourself, but just the more time you spend on the water, especially salt water, just the things that can kind of happen, and you're like, I remember when I was a kid, you'd hear stories and you're like, whatever. But then the more time you spend on the ocean, it's amazing what kind of draw it does have and the things and the moments it creates.
It's really, I guess it's for us in New Zealand, and I guess people everywhere, it's still the unexplored frontier. We can go explore new ground, go on massive adventures. Like you can't do a lot of that on land unless you're heading up into the hills and that. So I think you're right. You can just go out, explore, adventure, and the more time you spend out on the water, the more you see, the more situations you put yourself in, and the better the fish, the greater the fish you catch, and it's it's a pretty special place, and I think that's what draws us all back to it.
And you spoke about it there, but you talked about kingfish and going out that first time with Rick and getting your ass handed to you. With kingfish, like you would have seen, I suppose, when we think about like our kind of generation, we've seen a massive shift and change in the types of fishing. Back, I imagine when you first went out with Rick, what was it? Just live baiting, and that was probably about it. It was much jigging going on? Top water?
No, it was pretty much all live baiting. And so I think at that time I was working at Fish City. So fortunately through that period at Fish City, I got to see the mechanical jigging really sort of come online and that go gangbusters. Got to see soft baiting, that when it first started. That early fishing with Rick was all live baiting. And then as the trips progressed, we got we're fortunate to start mechanical jigging and top water fishing, and got to try out a lot of that fishing in its prime, before the fish got jig shy and before the sharks became a massive problem. But again, I remember one fish on pursuit, and it was when jigging first came around. Jigging when I hooked this fish, and we're at the middle ground, and it was like 80 meters of water, and I might have hooked it 20 meters under the boat, and this thing just took off, and I just slammed it to full drag, and I had a dive glove on, and I just was making no headway. It had the old Cortland black spot line on it, which is like rope, and this fish is just like Rick's up there watching, and I've just got my hand on my thumb planted on the spool trying to stop this thing, and I just couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
And all the way to the bottom, and bang, bust off. And I think before that, I hadn't lost a kingfish for years, I was like, oh, and Rick's like, man, that was a big fish, Scotty. And I was like, oof, got my ass just handed to me, tied on another jig just quick, back-to-back uni,
got to get
back in there. And I'd actually burnt a hole through the dive glove. It didn't have any.
Yeah.
It was moving that quick. So I think it was my mate Jack's dive glove. I was like, sorry about your dive glove, bro. But anyway, next fish 30 kilos.
Oh.
Yeah, and it didn't have a shade on the fish before it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely incredible. But another funny story with Rick on that trip, I used to have a wild mop, would have made Sideshow Bob proud. And I said to Rick, I was like, if you catch me a king over 30 kilos, Rick, I'll cut it all off. He was like, deal, Scotty. Yeah. So off the hair went.
Yeah. Was that the one that went? Got rid of the hair? That was the
that was the fish. So yeah.
Oh.
Timeless, huge amounts of good times on pursuit.
Yeah. So that sort of early stage of mechanical jigging was just phenomenal in those sort of places where you were getting to go.
Just everywhere, to be honest. And I remember in the Hauraki Gulf, my first place that I regularly hit. There's a place called 5 Mile Reef, which we kept secret for a long time. And the way that I found it was, had a customer at Fish City called Laurie, and I used to do a little bit of fishing with him. And anyway, he came in one day and he's like, oh, there's 35 on the chart. He's like, it's a reef and there's heaps of kingies there. I was like, yeah? And he's like, yeah, no, there's heaps of them. he's like, I don't like jigging or anything. So what he was doing is he was dropping 2 jigs down.
Yeah.
And then putting the rods in the rod holders and then just ripping off in the boat.
Oh, yeah.
And just boosting off. And like the jigs are just like ripping up through the water column. He's like, we caught the shit out of them, I was like, that sounds all right.
Yeah.
So we ripped out there with all our jigging gear. And yeah, I mean, they were never big fish. Like they were always, like 10 to 15 kilo fish. But in those early days, because no one was doing it or targeting them, like you'd go out and you'd catch 30 or 40 a time, and we were letting them all go. So we had that for probably a couple of years like that before people cottoned onto it. And then, I think over time, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, that type of when a style of fishing comes out and it's that effective, because, people get into it and they just get access to fish that they probably didn't have access to before. And I think people get a little bit trigger happy with keeping a few of them. And, I think the fish get caught a lot more than they normally would. They become jig shy and the fishery sort of tapers off a bit. So, unfortunately, it's probably not quite what it used to be, particularly up there. But, I mean, in those early days, it was just absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. And it's like the holy grail. You're like, I've got a secret for you, and you're going to go catch every kingfish. Tell me. Yeah. And you get it, and you go out and you do it, and you're like, holy, this is the best thing ever,
Yeah.
Just absolutely pumped. So, I was very fortunate to be, fishing that in the early days when it first came about. And getting to fish, like that at, White Island, jigging at the rangateras, like catching, fish after fish that are 20 odd kilos, just, it was mind blowing.
You'd know about it after a day on those, wouldn't you?
Oh, you're ruined. I think that day at the rangateras, that wasn't my first experience. I got to go back and have round 2 there. But towards the end of the day, like I caught quite a few good fish, and then like that last drop, like my arms were just jelly, and I just wound my jig up super slow. I was just like, man, I can't handle another one. Like getting cramp in the corners of your arms and just
bruises in the side of that.
Just ruined.
Yeah,
but that's what it's all about, you know. Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Yeah, because it's funny, because you get that. I suppose even with snapper, right? Like I grew up as a kid baiting burley fish. You only catch snapper hard on the bottom. And then now, holy, like, soft baiting comes in, and then the slow pitch jigging, and you're catching these fish, just out of sight, over the side of the boat. Like, how crazy is that? Like, there's all these fish for years that obviously we weren't fishing for because of the techniques and the styles that we were using, and now all of a sudden we've got access to those as well.
I think probably in the early days, snapper probably got written off as just a scavenger, that they live on the bottom and they just pick up bits here and there. But they're a super predator, they'll be in all parts of the water column. They're super versatile. So, one part of the year they'll be in the reefs hunting kinner and crayfish or whatever. And then the next, they're out on the bait schools mid-water smashing up pillies. They're an awesome fish. And, it's fortunate that, a lot of people have had the open mind and, tried different things, and, it's really taken off.
Yeah, because with them being so predatory too, when you're fishing that style, you get a lot different fight from a snapper too when you're hooking these things sort of mid-water. And, Brownie hooked one last year when I was with him retrieving a soft bait on the surface, trying to catch a carp.
Yeah, how's that?
You know what I mean? And pulls up a 28-pound snapper. I was like, what?
Yeah. They're an unbelievable fish, and you can catch them on your 15 kilo set or whatever. But if you really scale your tackle to target them, you can have a lot of fun with snapper. And I tell you what, even in a heavy soft baiting set, if you hook a big snapper in reefy country and shallow water, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, well, that was like that one that Brownie caught, and it was wicked. He's got the Minn Kota down, and he's chasing this thing around in like 4.5 meters of water through all these bommies and rocks, and oh man, it was it's pretty badass.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's like real sort of hang on stuff,
Yeah, and he was abusing me, making sure his knots didn't break because I retied his trace for him. So I'm stoked that didn't fail.
Do call him the power captain.
Yeah. You one thing I did want to talk about. There's that on one of Brownie's episodes. Was it you and Matt, and you just went up the far north? You had a pretty wicked session on some kingfish up there, didn't you?
Yeah, we were lucky that we got sent a couple of the new Saltiga, then the new Saltiga spinning reels to do sort of the final field test on. So they got sent to me at work, so straight away, the mind's ticking, where are we going to go give these a decent thrash? And, the far north is sort of always, one of the first places you'd go if the weather allows. So I sort of formulated a plan, and there's a rock up there that I've been to a few times. It's a long way offshore, but, said to Brownie, pretty keen to go up there and give these reels a thrash for the guys at Daiwa Japan before we, before they get this sort of final sign off. And, that's we went up there specifically jigging for kingfish. And I think if you still go far enough and wide enough, you can find those fish that aren't super jig shy. And we were fortunate that all the stars aligned, and we got to head out to this
some wicked weather.
Oh, it was, you couldn't get any better for up there, And and I kind of led them on a bit of a wild goose chase because I hadn't been there for years. And, I could hardly remember it, but I knew the rock was there. We didn't have the marks for it. So we got there and as luck would have it, like the first few drops, nothing. And I'm like, brought these guys all this way and we're not going to catch anything, And anyway, fortunately, we hunted round and we found the fish. And there, it was just, it was like an old school jigging session, So many fish over 20 kilos and, the fish are at, sitting at 50 metres, whatever, you let out 5 colours and you jig a couple times and you're on,
Yeah.
And just, good, solid fish and just non-stop. It was one of those, those sessions where your arms are just jelly at the end of it.
Yeah.
But, that was a pretty special trip, that one.
Yeah. And then, obviously, the reel stood up to the test. Any alterations to them after you just had that big session?
No, they were pretty good by that point. We'd fished with them before, and with that Saltiga reel, they, I think what Daiwa did well, which they, which is a testament to the end product which came out, is they combined the reel designers and then the field testing team. So there were a lot of guys catching bluefin and GTs offshore, and we obviously did the kinging fishing. But, they took everything from in the field and from the reel designers, combined that, and then that's how we got the reel at the end of it. So, they were, when they came out on the market, they were 100% awesome reel. One of the best spinning reels ever made,
Yeah. And then, like, with a reel like that, obviously, you just, when it turns up, you're like, you can't get any better. But then they bring out another few years and a little bit more development, new technology, and it does.
Yeah, it's amazing the Japanese tackle manufacturers, they've just got a thirst for design and development and what's now is not good enough for tomorrow, they're just always, and the technology is just absolutely mind-blowing what they come out with and, how they redefine something or make something better when and you're right, you get a Saltiga and you're like, man, this is it. How does it get any better? But then, then it does get better. So, yeah, it's incredible what, the minds at Daiwa can come up with.
Yeah.
And the tackle they bring us, And I mean, they're expensive reels, like, $1,600, whatever. But you look at it and then you think about the amount of work that goes into it and you're like, it's worth every cent.
Yeah. And then when you get that fish of a lifetime, you don't want a gear failure, do you?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. You spend all that. I mean, and that's one of the big things, when you're at like a boat show or you're in a shop and you're selling someone some fishing gear, and you say that to them, if you're serious about your fishing, you're spending all that money on your boat, all that money on gas, you're going all that way to be let down by gear failure, there's nothing worse. So, investing in the right tackle, making sure everything's rigged properly and giving yourself the best possible chance, you're putting yourself in the box seat to catch the fish of a lifetime,
Yeah.
And it's worth investing that time and that money and that effort to get everything right, And I think that's why a lot of, people, that we fish with and, like yourself or Brownie, Joe, like anyone, they just spend a lot of time in the prep work about getting everything 100% right. So, that if you're in that situation, you're not asking questions.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse. And I mean, we've all been there when you're going, man, should have I retied that knot, you have a few of those moments and you don't make those mistakes again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was something I learnt, pretty early on, especially with the game fishing. Once I started going down that rabbit hole, kingies, prior to that, and it's like I remember a mate saying to me, and I had a lot of trust in him because he was good at what he did, and he was like, "Mate, if you have any doubt, cut it off, do it again."
100%.
So every time I tie a knot, if I'm like, not quite sure, bang, I cut it off, and it's not until I'm like, oh yeah, I'm happy with that.
Well, anything like a kingfish in particular will expose any weakness, and I mean marlin is such strong, powerful fish, and you've got some pretty expensive hardware that's in that fish's mouth. You don't want it to to go because you've done a shoddy knot or whatever,
Yeah. Well, it's like listening to Rick talk about the guy with the expensive handmade stick baits.
Yeah.
And then just go cast out 2 cranks, bang.
Yeah.
And then does it again, bang. And he's like, "You gonna tie? Got any more of those? One more. You gonna tie it on? No."
Yeah.
$750 a pop, $1,500 in 2 casts.
Having a strong gin or something.
Yeah.
He's told that story on the boat before, and it would be one of my favourites.
Oh, so good. But it's just like, and that's the other thing too with fishing gear. And I'll use stick baits as an example. So you pay for quality, and it turns out that way, Well, it is that way for a reason. And people pay this money because they know they're going to get a good product. So, a Saltiga, $1,600, worth every cent. It is. And you only have to go and use one and have it in that moment when you've got that fish of a lifetime on and you want to catch it, and then you'll go, "Oh man, I'm glad I spent that money. I would have paid double, in that moment."
Yeah, well, that's right. And if you bought a reel that doesn't have half the drag or whatever, and you just watch that line empty uncontrollably till it hits the bottom, it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. And then just the smoothness of it and everything, and that's something we'll get more into. But around the stick bait side of it, I remember fishing with a mate when I first started getting into it, and I was in Japan at the time, and then so I had access to carpenters, and way cheaper than I think I was buying them for $80.
Yeah, wow.
And they're $250, $350
yeah.
At the time, and my mate had one, and then I remember we went out, and I didn't even know what stick baiting was, and he was like, "Oh yeah," and he had a rod, and he's like, "Have a go," and then we're casting, and he was just every cast or every second cast he's on, I'm just catching nothing. Probably my terrible technique as well, but and he was like, "Nah, mate, it's the stick bait. They love it." And there was other guys on the boat that do a lot of it as well, and his stick bait cost him $300 or something, I think. And they're just like, "Oh, I'd never pay that." And then after that trip, they all went and bought one because it just outfished.
Well, it's the Japanese meticulous attention to detail and the level of understanding that they go to make a product. Like, they don't just go and make a lure to make a lure. Like, the guys that make carpenters, or the guys that design lures at Daiwa, they're just invested so deeply in understanding the fish's habits, how they feed, what they like, what they want, and they take in all those, I guess, variables, and they combine it, and then they come out with a product, and then they test the product, and they've got such a high level of attention to detail and thirst for perfection that the end product that you get out of Japan is just stunning.
Yeah. And then, because I lived there for 6 years, and I can 100%, and looking at the way that they live their life and everything, you can see why their fishing gear is so good. So we used to do this thing where we used to try and find a bad place to eat because you just couldn't.
Yeah.
And you could be the smallest, dungiest looking restaurant. You go in there and the food's just immaculate. But they have so much self-pride. That's what, and everything over there is all about their heritage and their family name. So, like somebody making a stick bait or making a reel, they're not making that for Daiwa, they're making that for them. They know that at the end of the day, they're the ones that designed it. So if that fails, or that is not a good product, that shames them and their family, and that's the way that they look at all aspects of life. And then you see the thirst for perfection, because to them, their self-pride is right at the top of the list.
Oh, hugely. Yeah, and we're fortunate that we get to benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I suppose as we start to sort of tailor into the Daiwa side of things, I did want to talk about, you talked about testing the Saltigas here on the Kingfish with Brownie. This is something that I never knew was a thing until we started, having conversations. And I just thought we just get what's sort of designed or made for, because I would have thought New Zealand's a small part of the market globally. But there's actually gear that's designed and tested here in New Zealand for our conditions.
We are a very small part of the market, but we're fortunate that we've got, really good friends at Daiwa Australia and Daiwa Japan. And the Japanese, they love New Zealand as well, so they love coming down here. We've got a great fishery. So, I guess a combination of that. And I guess from our side as well, we need to get tackle right to release it to the market. I think that we have that same sort of level of pride. Like, we don't want to, have people fishing with product that fails or doesn't work, or they don't get the best possible experience out of. So, I guess that's where a lot of that, that drive for bringing the right product to the market comes from.
Yeah. And then I suppose we'll just carry on and continue to talk about the brand itself. And this was something I never knew, but when I went to Japan, like, Daiwa's everywhere. Like, it's got majority market share. And then, quickly, I was, sort of coming there and looking around and being used to what I saw here in New Zealand. And then all of a sudden they're like, no, Daiwa's the biggest fishing brand in the world. And that's a true fact, isn't it?
Yeah, no, globally, Daiwa is the biggest fishing tackle manufacturer.
Yeah.
They've obviously got a huge, wholesale component to their business. And then they've got, you would have noticed in Japan, they've got a massive retail presence as well through the casting shops.
Yeah.
That's all Daiwa shops as well. So, they're Daiwa's huge in fishing.
Yeah. And just from that, like, I want to sort of dive more into Daiwa New Zealand now, and I guess the brand and the journey, and I suppose the kind of adventure that it's gone on, especially in the last 24 to 36 months, and got a wicked social media presence, and I think all the listeners will agree with me on that. And has it been like a big shift and a big focus shift for you guys at Daiwa over the last sort of 2 to 3 years?
It's probably, I'd say it's probably going back probably 4 or 5 to where we really probably started to get some traction. We, a good friend of ours, well, mine now, Tom Slater at Daiwa Australia, he jumped on board as the product development manager over there. And what that let us do, it just gave us a lot more access to the ability to customise product for the New Zealand market. So in the past, if Kiwis are very particular in the way they fish and the way they like their tackle setup and like grip configurations and actions and all that. So probably in the past, prior to that point, we struggled to get product specifically designed for the New Zealand market. So Tom jumping on board, better access to the product. We started specifically developing rod ranges to suit the market. So I guess that's where the snowball effect started from. And then I guess for us, a real focus on that social media marketing side. I think that's the most important connection that, we have to, fishermen out there. That's how we connect and relate and, show them what's new and, in terms of fishing product. So I think on that, connecting the product to the marketing. And then, you can't sort of forget your key partners, your retailers. We don't sell direct. So, if we can get the product right and the marketing and, relationships and everything right with our key partners, it's a recipe for success across the board.
Mm-hmm. And that those relationships, that's, from what I understand in the conversations that we've had and talking with Matt as well, like those relationships are really, really important for Daiwa. I guess across content creators and then your retail stores and that as well.
We've had a real big focus on creating, what we think is the industry leading group of content creators. We want to have the best guys that are out there, and I think now we've got Brownie, who does an amazing job. The boys on the lateral line, Joe, and then people like Tony from Moocher Hunters. I don't want to sort of leave anyone out, but we've got Injun from Extreme Fishing. There's just a lot of key core guys that, love the product, love fishing, and, creating, next level content. So, we're very fortunate to have a really good group of content creators on board as well.
Yeah. And then I suppose through that and what's been in social media of late, sort of leading into Christmas, this podcast was originally meant to be done before the release, but good old COVID got in the way of that. But so Unleashed is, I guess, the big sort of marketing campaign or release campaign that's currently it's in full flight now, isn't it? And has been since just prior to Christmas?
Yeah, I think, I guess one thing that we're fortunate is we're pretty agile in market, and with the challenges that COVID's presented us, we weren't able to lock in the content production trips like we would have liked. Being in Waikato, Brownie got stuck in here. And you weren't allowed to use the boat, and then other periods he wasn't allowed to get through Auckland, and so we came to a point where we haven't been able to create the content how we would have liked. So we came up with the concept Unleashed, to cater for our biggest release calendar to date. The amount of new product that we've brought to market this year, just probably, far exceeds the last 3 or 4 years, So
that's pretty impressive too when you think about the current climate and what's been going on in supply, demand, and the rest of it. It's pretty cool that Daiwa as a brand is in a position to be able to do that.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate, and you just want to keep the pace up. But I think one of the key aspects to that is that a lot of Daiwa's factories are Daiwa owned, so they've got really good control over the process. So I guess there's factories that are owned by the brands, and then there's factories that multiple brands buy all sorts of product from. So there might be a rod builder in China that we're buying from, that Shimano's buying from, that Penn are buying from. So those guys are getting absolutely slammed with everyone, because globally the fishing market's just exploded, So there's so much demand on those factories, whereas the Daiwa factories, there's an allocation schedule that you fit into, so you know what you're getting, when you're getting, and you can sort of plan more effectively. And fortunately, we've been given space in those allocations to get all the new products that we wanted done. And the guys again, going back to that great relationship we've got with the guys at Daiwa Australia, their product range is bang on over there. And there were a few key categories that we were missing out in. So Tom actually gave us space in those factories before then where they could just keep doing the same product and do it well. We got to bring online new product that we, in categories that we weren't filling before. So, yeah, we're very fortunate. And, yeah, it's just let us release just a huge amount of new product into the market for the summer.
Yeah, that's cool that they have that working relationship with, Daiwa Australia, because, we all know how the New Zealand and Australian relationship goes, but it's that must be extremely helpful for us here.
Oh, for sure. And, going back to what I said before, we probably wouldn't be in the position we're in now if we didn't have that access to that level of being able to customise product to the New Zealand market. Because at the end of the day, you're pushing shit uphill, giving a Kiwi softbait angler a softbait rod with a butt that's too short. He wants to put it into his hip, get heaps of leverage. He wants to cast it like a surf caster to the horizon. So, that's what you need to give that angler. But, for the Australian angler or softbait fishermen, they're one-handed casting, they're fishing lighter line, they're catching smaller fish. So they don't want that configuration. But if you try and give that rod to a Kiwi angler, he's going to go, no, I'm just going to buy, something that suits me. So by being able to create that product that suits the market, it's massive for us.
Yeah. Cool. And then with that, I suppose with Unleashed and what's going on, what's being constantly released at the moment, what is your kind of pick of the bunch?
In terms of product?
Yeah. You can name a few if you want.
Probably the bait junkie minnows.
Oh, yeah.
I really like that we brought out a bigger minnow for soft baiting. I've got a sort of theory that when when you're fishing, particularly in deeper water, a lot of the better fish eat on the drop. And then with a soft bait with a paddle tail, as opposed to a jerk shad, which sort of just drops straight down with no action, with that paddle tail, you're getting a lot of movement. Looks like a fish, bait fish, dying on descent. So you get a lot of bites on the drop. And then those paddle tails for fishing in around the wash and murkier water and that as well, just heaps more action. So I was pretty excited that that they came online. What else? The new Saltiga top water rods. It's always nice to bring out a top end new casting rod.
Yeah.
They're a beautiful bit of equipment. The Revelry reels, I've been started fishing with a few of them. They're really nice too.
Yeah.
With a couple of that, a lot of that new key Daiwa technology like the monocoque body and mag seal and all that. They've been really good. But yeah, just all of it.
All of it. Yeah, so all the listeners go and buy all of it.
Yeah, I think there's bits and pieces, of all of it in my kit at the moment. I try and keep, my personal fishing range of equipment as fresh as possible.
Yeah.
I've got a few old battlers that I can't let go of, like my old bait fishing sets, like SL30s and SLX20s on VIPs and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
That I probably wouldn't change for the world, but yeah, a lot of that lure fishing and that new product, I'm constantly changing out.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I had what's the Fish City had one there the other day of one of the new soft bait rods. It's got the carbon fiber eyes.
The TD Battlers.
Yeah, they're.
Yeah, they're an incredible piece of kit. So the guide frame, instead of being, an alloy or whatever, is actually made out of carbon fiber, and so it just makes the action of the rod like super crisp, responsive. And it was quite interesting, and I actually heard Tom talking about it from Daiwa Australia, but it's like if you can imagine a diving board with a sandbag at the end. If it's got a 5 kilo sandbag, you bend it and it's bouncing, it's going to bounce for a long time. But if you reduce that weight to nothing, it comes back to level really quick. And it's the same with fishing rods. So if you're investing in those AGS guides, titanium guides that are super lightweight, it just improves the action of your rod massively. And the flip side to that is the benefit of it as an angler is if your rod's coming back to neutral a lot faster, it improves your accuracy. So if you've got a soft rod that's waving around and taking a long time to come back to that neutral position, it's just, the line's sort of going everywhere, and then, your accuracy is not as good. And if your line's moving straighter through the air, there's less wind resistance, so you're casting further. So, it's pretty impressive technology, and it goes back to the Japanese guys just going to the extremes to just design the best product possible.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool, because then you think about that and think about uses, and that wash fishing, that's really popular here in New Zealand for snapper, and being able to, I did it with Brownie, and he's gun at it and loves it, and just the little nooks and crannies that he was casting into, like I would never have dreamed to try and put a bait in there, because I was like, I'm going to end up casting it on the rocks, but I thought it was obviously through, it obviously is through good technique, but obviously he's got the gear to do it too as well.
Yeah, a lot of it is good technique, but if you're at that level, you can get just that extra little percentage to make your casting even better, and that can be the difference between putting your bait in the right spot and the wrong spot. Particularly for that wash fishing, it's just a constantly changing environment, because you're not standing stationary. So one minute you're casting at a bommy, the next minute you're casting at the edge of the white water, next minute you're trying to fire it right up into a gut. So yeah, it's a constantly changing environment, and to have that advantage of the accuracy, it's a big deal.
Yeah, well, Rick talked about it on his podcast about most people can get to 90%, within a few years if they're invested in it and they got a bit of talent and whatnot. But it's those extra percentages, and then when you start talking about that kind of detail in the rod, there'll be a lot of people listening to this that are probably fishing at 90%, 92% in terms of like how good they could be, but then adding something like this, like a tool, like a TD Battler into their arsenal to be able to give them those extra few percent, those are the sort of gains and I guess the the target clientele that you're kind of looking at with these kind of products?
Just like hitting cheat mode.
Yeah.
No, but that's what it is, and that's the type of person that will pick up that rod and notice a difference.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like me, if I pick up like the best golf club and whack it, and if I go whack a cheap golf club, I'm probably not going to notice the difference. And I guess and probably golf clubs are a good analogy because, like I should, buy a cheap golf club that's slower, more forgiving, because I'm never going to notice the difference out of that top end club. And the same with fishermen. If you're a really good fisherman and you want the best out of you and I guess your ability, if you pair that up with a product like that TD Battler, you'll notice the difference. You get those extra gains. That person should be looking at a rod like that, and they will notice the difference and they'll get more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would, because I've got the TD Black, and I grabbed that, for the first time, and I was just like, oh man, this thing's wicked. But then I had those two sort of side by side, and I didn't think you could, I picked up my TD Black, and I was like, man, this thing's beautiful. And it is, like, it's a beautiful rod, but then, having the other one in your hand, you're like, oh my God, there's like a fair bit, like just the whole balance of it.
Yeah, and just the lightness and the responsiveness and the guide. So, and I think fishing tackle's pretty fair in the sense that you get what you pay for. Sure, it's nearly $1,000 rod, but I mean, if you tried to break it down, what it would take to, but even from that design side, to design a guide made out of carbon fiber, to get the insert in it, and just the thought process and the build process behind it, it's kind of worth every penny.
Yeah, and then that just doesn't happen either. That's got to be tested, and the one that goes to market, that's not version 1. It's probably version 20 or 30 by the time they tinker with different things and weights and balances, lengths, and etc.
Yeah, well, though I mean the rod, I guess the process of bringing a new rod to market, and those the 3 models that we're doing, and you'll only find those in New Zealand. Like we've designed them for the New Zealand fishermen and the New Zealand market. So I mean, what will happen is a lot of the time Tom's doing the cosmetic design of the product, and then we'll go to Tom with the configurations we want. Then he'll go to the factory. We'll get action samples down, so you'll get the like very raw just grips and the guides that you can test the action. Then we'll get a cosmetic sample, check it's all 100%, and from that point, that's when we would order it from the factory.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of work goes in the background to get the product right before we bring it into the market.
Yeah. And then in terms of like reels, like what's the kind of, you talked about the Revelries there, but what's the difference in those and what they've sort of brought to the market?
In terms of like,
just their, I suppose, the technology and how they kind of fit in.
We don't have a lot. I mean, from a New Zealand perspective, we get to have a bit of input into, I guess, the product development. When they've made a product, we get to test it. We get to provide feedback. But I mean, it's probably a good example. Our market's too small to
have a big...
Well, to go and get a whole reel range designed just specifically for New Zealand. Because the amount of work, the volumes and that, they just don't work. So there's a few models that we have had and we do have now that Australia has. They sort of designed for Australasia. So that the Revelry is a good example. That's only for New Zealand and Australia. But, we get a model that's exclusive for us. They get to pick the cosmetic, the technology, and then we get to fit it into a price point where it fits in with everything else that we're doing from the global range. So it's quite handy that there's still that level of ability to bring that product in. Yeah.
So the Revelry, that's like is that a brand new product for this current like calendar year? Is that?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Revelry came in as a price point below the Cert 8. So the Cert 8, it's pretty similar to a Cert 8 in a lot of the features and technology. But the Cert 8's made in Japan, in the Japanese factory. The Revelry comes out of one of the Daiwa factories in China. So you can just make it for a bit cheaper. You can deliver all the key technologies and functions just for a slightly better price point.
Yeah. Oh, nice. And then the Cert 8, when did that come into? Because that fits just under the Saltiga, right? In terms of
Yeah, it does. So there was originally the LT, the little soft baiting reels.
Yep.
And testing my memory a bit now, but I think they might have been 2016 that they came out. So they were originally all the smaller sort of soft baiting sizes. And in the past, in the Daiwa range, there used to be a reel called the Catalina, which sort of sat below the Saltiga. So what they've done now is they've sort of down-spec'd the Saltiga slightly, and then created that Certate SW range of reels. So again, you're getting a lot of the core Saltiga technology and quality just at a slightly reduced price.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it drops out the ball handle, doesn't have the mag seal bearings on either side of the on the body. It's got a Zion rotor, doesn't have the alloy rotor. So there's just a few little bits and pieces that it drops out, but essentially you're still getting the core of a Saltiga. It's the same drag. Everything in that sort of sense is the same specifications.
It's just those little
they just drop out a little bit of little technology or a little bit features.
Yeah.
And then you get to hit a reel at a pretty good price point.
Yeah, I love mine. Like I've got the little 4,000, and then is it just trying to think what my jigging one is. Is it 10?
I've got a 10,000p.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, they're pretty badass. Like, they're so smooth, the drag. Like it.
And the noise it makes.
It's so good.
It makes know when you're hooked up, eh?
Yeah. No, that's I think most fishermen enjoy that part, eh?
Yeah, well, I think Daiwa have done a much better job with those reels in comparison to the previous Saltigas. That drag noise is a lot more pronounced. That's a nice sound to hear.
It is a nice sound to hear. But it's just one thing that I do know, and once you get into those like those high-end reels, is that the smoothness of the drag. So you'll I think all of us have probably been on a boat when somebody's had, the Mecca reel, and then someone hasn't, and it's just that real smooth, and the other one's like a bit jumpy. Is that there's obviously a shitload of technology and design that goes into creating that smoothness.
Yeah, and Daiwa's got a really good name in the market for having super smooth drags. And what they came out with is they came out with a drag, what they call it ATD, it's automatic tournament drag.
I did want to talk about this.
Yeah, so and it really comes down to the grease that they use, because what you'll find in your finesse style reels, they use for lighter lines and lighter leaders, and that you use felt drags, and then your Saltigas, your heavier saltwater applications, you use a carbon drag. But essentially, what that grease does is it's quite tacky to start off with, and then when the load comes on, I guess it kind of loosens up, to try and explain it simply. So what that does is you're going from, it's making that transition from no drag to the drag, line exiting the reel super smooth. So it's stopping that startup inertia. Because if you've got a real sticky drag, particularly if you're fishing a light line or super heavy line, and you've got a fish that just rips off at 100 miles an hour, if that transition's not smooth, that pressure that's going through to your knots or your line, you can just ping it.
Yeah.
So that drag, that ATD drag technology that they're using now on those reels is just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and then when you talk about the different forms of fishing and how that's developed too, your stick baiting, jigging, that kind of thing, there is a real quick drag change. Like, I think, everyone that's listening that has done jigging before, you're winding one way, and then when you get that good one hit and it's going 100 miles an hour the other way, that's where you're going to notice that difference, aren't you?
Yeah, you don't want to. You certainly don't want a sticky drag.
Yeah.
And you want a drag that performs well over the course of a fight as well. You don't want a drag that just is nice for the first run. If you're playing a big snapper or a big kingy or any fish, you want that drag to perform flawlessly over the course of the fight.
Yeah.
You don't want it to heat up and become sticky and jerky so I think that's a real good feature of the Daiwa reels at the moment. So the drags are just unbelievable.
Oh yeah, one thing I did want to talk about was, we mentioned a little bit there, but about the content creators and the people that you're working with, and you name some of them, and we don't have to go back and name them again, but just the importance of, I suppose, in this current climate, having have genuine content creators, and like there's got to be a fine balance, right, from going, just getting as much content as possible to having really good, strong quality content and genuine content.
I think and genuine's probably the right word. You want people that are genuinely passionate about fishing, that love it, love the product, and I think from that point you get a crew of people that, I mean, they're not trying, they're just doing what they love, and we're all a part of that journey together. Nothing's, I think with anything, it shouldn't be forced, it should just be natural. Because and I think a big thing for us is, whether it's from, the guys in the office, the sales team, whoever, our content creators, we want it to be fun, and, we want to build a really good culture, and we all want to be on the journey together, I mean, at the end of the day, before we're businessmen, before we're anything, we're fishermen, and, that's what means the most to us, and that's what drives us. And, for us to be on that journey and drag other like-minded great people with us, it's just a big part of the picture.
Yeah, well, because with my professional career and being, obviously playing professional rugby, culture has always been the number one thing. When that is right, success comes through it. And for years, I knew what it felt like and knew what it was, but it wasn't until I was actually forced to kind of explore it to gain a better understanding of what culture was. And it was just, I actually Googled it, and it's the behavioural, the attitudes and behavioural characteristics of a particular social group. So when you start talking about that, it's about more than just actions. It's about creating a behaviour and a habit, and the whole team being on that same page and on that same journey, and then that's the key to success, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we've got a really key, part of the team at work, Matt Wald, who came from Luxottica. They do like Oakley Sunnies and that. And, he was a huge addition to the team, and he brought that ethos around culture, like he did he's done a really great job of, I mean, for me personally, like getting a better understanding of, and like you say, culture is such a huge thing, and if you can grasp it and, what it means is huge. So Matty's done a really good job of jumping on board and bringing that cultural element to the forefront through the sales team, and, working with the ambassadors, and, he's been a real pivotal part, I'd say, of, the cultural shift that, people are seeing in Daiwa,
Yeah, because it's easy to get hung up on numbers, and I notice this a lot in sport, is certain coaches, some coaches can just get the best out of people, and other coaches that I had, they look at numbers and stats, and they kind of coach that way. But all the best players that I've played with, they're not necessarily the best statistically in terms of, their body weight or their speed times or whatever. But for whatever reason, they can just play footy, and they're good at it. And people want to be around them. And then when you start sort of flipping that across into, I guess, content creators, like, yeah, you can get guys out there that going, fishing as an example is probably a better one. There's plenty of dudes out there that have got world records that aren't good fishermen. But the numbers, you would look and go, oh, he's the man, he's got a world record. But it's those, like, just having the right people involved in, I guess, the organisation and the brand.
Yeah, it needs to be relatable. You can go catch all the world records you want, but you could be the most gruff, antisocial fisherman. And yeah, you just want someone that's relatable, genuine, honest, and passionate about it. And and that shines through more than anything else.
Yeah, well, if you look at it and you look at the people you've got creating the content, and we'll use Brownie again, as he's going to owe me a beer after this. We've brought him up that many times, but the little clip he did about fishing, like right at the start of Unleashed, and he talks about what fishing means, and like that there, I think resonates so well with anybody that fishes.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't want to give him too much of a big head, but he does a bloody good job. He's got that ability to communicate the what fishing means to people, and he sent through a clip, and it was the Northland one of when I think we're going out of Hohora, and he's talking through like it, it's really fluffy, but I was watching it with my partner Lauren. She's like, oh shit, she's like, that made me a little bit teary.
Oh yeah.
And like for for that to touch someone in that way, it's pretty powerful. Not everyone has that sort of that talent,
No. Well, that's one thing. Like it's when you're kind of like you say, like, oh yeah, it's a bit fluffy, but it's maybe it's that way because we kind of do it and we take it for granted. But then when you're kind of removed from that and from the outside looking in, you're like, oh well, fishing is more than, to us it is passion and we live and breathe it and we love it. But to the people that don't, they probably don't understand that and what that feeling is or what it looks like.
Yeah, and Brownie's got a really good way of articulating that. And I think you're totally correct. For a lot of people from the outside that aren't fishermen looking in, I think you're out there just killing fish needlessly or whatever. But I mean, for whether for fishermen, fisherwomen, it's more than just that. It's been I guess immersed in the environment. Being out there with friends, the camaraderie. Like it's all that. It's just tying in so many different elements, and I think fishing's a really important, particularly to males. Like it's a great escape. It's good for mental health. It's enriching for the soul. There's so much that everyone's sort of faced with in day-to-day life. It's a good escape, and that's what fishing is for a lot of people. You can have an absolute terrible week, and that can quickly be
one bite. And then
that can be one bite. The turning of the ignition on the boat, or steering the boat to the horizon. And sort of all those worries are behind you.
It's a great way to like connect with people too, fishing. Like we did the Anglers Escape last year that Aaron set up, and the weather was horrendous. Like I think it was 35 knots southeasterlies the whole time, but fishing was so secondary. Like it was just about being there with a bunch of like-minded good bastards, and it turned into like a men's mental health retreat by accident. And then like I can't wait to go back this year for that reason.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
And through that Daiwa app that we've got, the guy that created that, Stefan, he's an interesting guy, and you should get him on your podcast. You should find him. Yeah, I mean he'll talk forever on it. But one really interesting thing, he spent a lot of time around the science side of what fishing is for humans and what it does for us, and fishing's, I probably won't do it all the justice it deserves, but it's the only socially acceptable form of hunting that we've got.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, 1,000 years ago, however, we were kind of almost, cavemen, we were hunting to survive. And that mechanism in the human brain or whatever of the level of problem solving, hunting, and being out there, it's a really core part of being a human. And a lot of people don't have that in their lives, and surprisingly, it's really important to people's mental health. And he said that, again, I mean, you want him to describe it properly, but there's just not many other things in life that make the brain work in that way that fishing or hunting does, in terms of the level of problem solving. Because, I mean, as a fisherman, you don't just get your boat and put it in the water, and, that the level of thought that you've had to put into go out and catch that fish, a marlin's a great example. You've got all your tackle ready, you've done a huge amount of research on where the fish are, and then your quarry, its habit, where it's going to be, what it's going to be doing, and you've combined all that knowledge and all that thought into that one moment to put you into the best possible place. And there's not a lot in, and obviously you have to catch it and deal with it, and then if you've kept it, bring it back, and just what it does as a collective for the human mind is huge.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense when you explain it like that. Thanks for that. But about it being the only acceptable form of hunting, for that in itself, do you reckon it's acceptable because now we can put the fish back?
I think a lot of what people are doing now, we're kind of going away from that real sort of meat hunter philosophy with fishing in New Zealand. There's a lot more catch and release fishing competitions, which I'm all for. And I think people are becoming a lot more environmentally conscious. The more we look after the resource, the more it'll, look after us essentially, So I think in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, well, you just look at the resource, like marlin as an example, with all the technology and the information sharing that's become available, and it's just boomed the industry, right? Like, I'm out there in a 4.65 meter boat, and there's numbers of other people doing the same thing that 10, 15 years ago, they wouldn't even thought of doing that, but because of technology and I guess the ability to be able to gain knowledge and the internet and social media and the rest of it, and people being willing to share that, it's just opened up a whole new world to a lot of fishermen.
Yeah, and the gear that's available. I'd hate to see the state of a 4.5 meter boat 20 years ago.
Yeah. Running around with 80 watts.
Yeah, running around with 80 watts. Having to mix fuel out at sea.
Yeah, put a bit of salt water in with the oil. I'm sure they'll go good at it.
But yeah, I think there's a real sort of shift in conscience and what people, how people perceive the fishery and what it is. And I think that'll keep moving with the times as we go forward as well. And, I think for all of us, we need to play a part of that process and promote it, through that Daiwa tournament app. Now you can have a catch and release fishing competition, because I'm not a big fan of seeing heaps of dead fish just killed to be weighed in. You got the likes of Tony from Moocher Hunters. He's a big advocate for catch and release. Same with old Joe. They're doing a really good job of taking care of fish on the rocks and letting them go. And I think for all of us, the more we can preserve the fishery and look after it, the better it's going to be for a long time.
Mm. Yeah, well, fishing, I suppose, we've brought it up a few times, but it's transitioning. I suppose in the younger generation, it's transitioning into more sport than the provider style of fishing of what it was when I grew up as a kid. Like, you only went fishing, you always want to catch big fish, but you're going fishing to kill fish because you want a fish to eat. And there's still room for that, and we should still go out and be able to catch fish to keep to eat. But there's been a big shift in the younger generation of fishing, men and women, to be more sport based.
I think people have genuinely got a better understanding of, it's not a hard concept to grasp. If you put a fish back, it's gonna, it's still gonna be there. But if you kill it, it's not. That's a big thing for me. Like, I love letting big snapper go. So someone else has the ability to catch it down the track. It seems like a waste just to chuck it in the chili bin. But in the same instance, I'm totally fine with if you want to feed for the family. That's also what it's there for. It's just it's that balance. But I think definitely going forward, people are fishing so much now. You don't actually have the need to kill your limit every time. So, if you're fishing regularly, it makes sense to let fish go. There's quite a cool, you've probably seen Scott Tyndale doing the tagging program.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people tagging fish now, and like tagging, I've had a few tagged fish re-caught now.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting in itself, having a fish that's, been at liberty for however long and then re-caught and finding out how far it's moved and what it's done. But, I think, he's a great example of someone that's personally invested in understanding the fishery and, getting fish released and understanding what they're doing afterwards.
Yeah. Well, a good mate of mine, Callum, we caught his first marlin off Raglan, I'll be 4 years ago now. And that fish was tagged. So that was like quite cool.
Oh, it was tagged?
Yeah, it had a tag in it. And we'd oh, this is pretty wicked, to his first one. We decided he really wanted to keep his first one, and I'm all for that. But the one thing we're really gutted with, the fish was caught 2 years prior in New Plymouth, and we caught it out here off Raglan, 120 metres straight off the bar, pretty much straight out there. And we actually saw that fish feeding on bait before because it had a rip in its fin.
Yeah.
And then when quite often when you catch a marlin, you get it up and the dorsal fin's been ripped from the trace, and then obviously that because it had re-healed, from the rip, and then we saw it feeding. We're like, oh look, that one's got a rip in its fin, and we've actually got a photo of it coming out of the water feeding with its dorsal up, and you can see the rip in it. And then we end up 10 minutes later hook it up and catch it, and it was quite cool to see how I suppose that fish had ripped its fin 2 years ago, but obviously it just re-healed and it was fine. It was perfectly healthy. But the one disappointing thing is they didn't have an estimated weight when they tagged it, because it would have been really interesting to see, was that a 70 or 80 kilo fish 2 years ago, and now I think it was 128 maybe, or whether it was about the same size. Like, it would have been quite cool to know that.
Yeah, they're a pretty fast growing fish, aren't they? I actually had a tagged fish on a pursuit. That was that fish. I think it was that fish that was 30 kilos that I lost my hair for. It was tagged, and then I knew the guy that had caught it before me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it had been at liberty for like 1,119 days, and it had gone from like 20 that estimate, because Rick had caught it previously on pursuit.
Yeah.
So that it had gone from like 23 kilos to 30 kilos. I think it was originally caught at the Vulcan Rocks and had swum over to the middle ground. But yeah, interesting, eh? Like,
yeah.
One fish in the ocean and one of your mates has caught it before you.
That's crazy, yeah. So you're saying you've had a few fish caught, your ones that you've personally caught.
Yeah.
Are they kingfish or?
No, snappers.
Snappers?
Yeah, so I got a 60 centimetre fish at Horn Rock, soft baiting. And then, actually know the guy that caught that as well. Then Josh Darby, he caught it after me. I forget how long after, but not very long. So it hadn't moved at all. And then another tagged fish at Cowo. And again, that was a smaller fish. That was, like 35 centimetres or something. But yeah, that had sort of stayed in the same location too.
Yeah. That's pretty cool to know. Like, good for research too. And I guess good peace of mind for anglers, knowing that fish, you haven't upset its, I guess, behaviour or habits too much if it's getting caught in the same place and it's still eating a soft bait. Like,
yeah.
It's still actively feeding.
Well, it's good to know that you can let fish go and they survive. And I think it goes a lot to say to people to fish responsibly as well. Like, come springtime, particularly in the Hauraki Gulf, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. So, I mean, you shouldn't go out into 50 metres and, catch and release a, 50 snapper just for fun. Because, probably quite a few of them are going to die because of the difference in pressure coming up from deep water to shallow water and embolizing. But, go out, fish responsibly, catch your fish. And then if you want to go and catch some more fish and do some catch and release, go in the shallows, target your fish soft baiting, and, you're going to be able to release them in the best possible condition, and they're going to survive. And if a fish doesn't look like it's going to survive, there's no point in putting it back just for the sake of putting it back. Take it home for a feed.
Yeah. And there's plenty of people out there that, I suppose that's one part of what I love about fishing, is providing for other people that don't get the opportunity. Like, I'll always, if I go for a fish, I'll drop some fish off at the neighbours and, down the road and whatnot, and different friends and that I know don't have access to it because it's expensive. Like, if you want to go and buy fish.
What's it in the supermarket?
I'd hate to think what it is now.
With the price of petrol and everything going up.
Yeah.
It's going to cost the commercial boys a few more dollars to go out and catch them. And say that in terms of catch and release, kingies, go catch as many as you like and let them go. They're super hardy. They can come up from deep water and they survive really well,
Yeah. And they're pretty, like, they're tough, eh? Like, the amount of, I've caught quite a few kingfish with, like, shark bites out of them, and they've, like, they're fully healed. You pull up and go, oh, this thing looks a bit funny. It's got a big chunk out of its back, fully healed over, and still gives you a mean ass scrap. And you're just like,
tough, eh?
They must be so tough.
Yeah, but that's it, if you've caught your snapper, go and chase a kingy, or, just change what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, that plays its part in itself and looking after the fishery.
And that seems to be the fish in New Zealand is the kingfish. Like, so many people want to catch a kingy. And I talked to Matt Watson about it, I talked to Rick about it. Like, I as a kid growing up, that's all I wanted to do. It was like, I just wanted to catch kingfish.
You know, it's the same. Like, kingfish were, you probably watch Kingfish Secrets.
Yeah.
You see how that,
Rick's on that.
Yeah,
hey,
gets you, fishing dead flying.
That's right.
Yeah, dead flying fish down at White.
Yeah.
But, like for me, the quest to catch kingfish when I was a kid, I read from start to finish old Mark Kitteridge's book, Hook Up on Kingfish, I think it was called. And, make a plan, get after I got my nana to drop me down at the local point, Browns Bay Point, get my float right, catch a live piper, hook it like I read in the book, send it out, catch a kingfish, you're just pumped.
Yeah. And then that goes back to the whole prep, you talked about the hunting side of it and you talked about marlin, the preparation. That's the exact same thing, right? It's the same with snapper, it's the same with kingfish. It's that preparation to go and achieve a goal at the end of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point in itself. For anyone that's getting into fishing or wants to get better at fishing, there's no shortage of information out there at the moment. And you can kind of eliminate all the guesswork for yourself. More so today than what you could in the past. So, if you really want to catch that fish, get better, learn and master a new technique. Just study up, read about it, and you've like I say, you've taken out all that guesswork, and you're gonna put yourself in the best possible position. It's all out there.
Yeah. And I think about it when you explained about the hunting side of it and being able to test yourself and, I guess in the elements and have a goal at the end of it and how good it is for mental health. It's so much like sport.
Yeah.
And I reckon that's why sport's so good, for mental health. And I just know what I used to go through day to day, week to week with my professional playing career is that, the beauty of it was the preparation. What you'd spend your days doing leading in to be able to go out and perform on a Friday night or Saturday night, when the pressure's on and all the eyes are watching and you get it right, it's a pretty wicked feeling and it doesn't happen by chance. And that's what I think a lot of people from the outside looking in that don't know how it works, and fishing is probably going to be the same. They don't really understand it. They don't get the preparation to be able to perform in that moment. They just think, you're either a good fisherman or you're not. Just like, you're either a good rugby player or you're not, but you're not. There's a whole lot more to it to put yourself in the best position to be able to execute under pressure when you need to.
Probably makes you more comfortable in that moment too, right? Mm. You're prepared for it. There's not as many unknowns. You're ready to go.
Well, yeah, you're very different for you now if you hooked that 30-kilo kingfish than when you were that 17-year-old on Rick's boat, right?
Yeah. Not him barking in my ear telling me to put my rod down.
Go sit down, Scotty.
You're wasting the fish's time. That was a very humbling experience, but a good experience in the same time,
Yeah.
Because it makes you sit down and probably readdress the direction you're taking your fishing in.
Yeah.
But no,
and then it lit a fire, right?
Oh, for sure. And then, like anything, and with people, I guess there's always that thirst to get better, do better, with whatever you do. So, whether it's sport, fishing, or anything you do in your work life or your personal life, if you've got that drive, you can always take what you're doing to that next level.
Yeah. And then just how have you, you worked in a tackle store, right? So you're at Fish City. And then did you go from Fish City, just transition from there into working with Daiwa, or was there more steps to the ladder?
So I started working at Rebel Sport when I was about 16.
Yep.
Up in Albany, and I probably worked through there till I was about 20. And then I thought that going to uni would be for me, so I started doing environmental science. And then got a bit of the way through that, and I kind of just thought to myself, I was like, man, I'm going to do this degree, and then I'm going to come out of it. I'm probably not even going to use it. I think just times and situations change, and you think one thing and you jump into it and go, well, maybe. So I probably realised that wasn't going where I needed to do, and so I just thought, I'll just back myself and see where it takes me. And I think with anything, if you if you're passionate about something and you work hard enough and you do a good enough job, you know, it'll take you somewhere, or the right people will notice, and you know, you end up somewhere where you want to be. So from there, I think I went back to Fish City, worked there for a bit, and then kind of got over the whole fishing. You know, everything was just fishing. You know, fishing. So I pulled up stumps and went over and lived in Australia for a bit. Lived in Melbourne, and full 180 on. Couldn't have gone any further from fishing. Ended up doing like corporate debt collection. And it's not a feel-good industry, you know. You're getting a whole bunch of like bad debts, and you like contact tracing people. No, it was actually horrible. It was soul destroying. You know, you're looking for money in people, the bones of their ass essentially, and that's just not me. You know, it was draining for the soul. So, one day I woke up in Melbourne and I packed my bags and came home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm like, this just isn't for me. And then came home, and I actually had to work for that company for a little bit here till I got my job back at Fish City. I think got back in the middle of winter and it just wasn't busy, and fortunately got my job back at Fish City. And then the time John Elliott, who was our sales rep, and one of my other really good friends, Jack, he was sales repping there, and they were looking for another sales rep, so I got offered the opportunity to go for an interview, and I got the job at Wynyard or Daiwa, and that was probably 11 years ago now, and then just sales rep, and I've got a huge passion for fishing and the product, and it just sort of transpired into the role that I'm in today.
That's cool, because we talked about it off air, but if you're passionate about something, then you'll like find a way. And I feel now, it's probably changed a little bit now, but when I was at school, I thought you had to be educated to be able to do things, and my education came through sport. That was all I did from the age of 17. It was play professionally, but the amount of life skills that I learned through there that I can now apply into, like I'm the general manager of an organisation. Like, how the hell did that happen? And I've no education past like fifth form, which is, what's that, year 11, I think. You know, really, like I was at school, but I wasn't really at school. I was there to tick the box so I could go to rugby training on Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, it sounds like we sort of cut from a similar cloth.
Yeah.
But you're right though, you know, if you're passionate about something and you can stick your mind to it, and you've got a lot of those core values, and you're prepared to adapt, learn, you know, you can kind of take yourself anywhere, you know. You just got to have the drive to do it.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And I spoke about it with Rick. I've spoken about it with all podcast guests. Brownie, the same. Like that drive and like passion, it makes you do things that it'll help you through when it gets hard. And then the amount of times I've gone out and had my ass kicked in my little boat, but the passion and the drive to find another fish, to catch another marlin, keeps you going back because you love it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the icing, you know. There's the cake is, late nights and spreadsheets and, many extra thankless hours that you put in, but, then you do get the icing on top, It's not all,
Yeah.
It's not always as what it seems. You got to do the hard work in the background too. And you particular from your sporting career, how you would have had to grind out training sessions and that, there's a lot of hard work that goes into
thankless jobs that you just have to be done. Like, you've just got to do them.
But it's funny, you don't really think much about them, but they, if you can tick those boxes, they build foundations to where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like fishing, right? You got to bake the cake. You got to grease up the wife to get the time to go, and the amount of arguments that causes.
Yeah.
Just for the icing of being able to go fishing and hopefully catch a fish.
Easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
I think most fishermen and women will resonate well with that one.
Yeah. What time are you going to be? You said 9 o'clock. Oh, yeah, no. It's, the fish only came on the bite at just before dark. What time are you going to be home? I don't know, 11? I think we've all been there, eh?
Oh, I think we're there on a daily basis. Like,
Yeah.
it's this time of year. There's a bit of a struggle in my household because the game fishing season's in full swing and long days. And I saw a funny meme on the internet a while ago, actually, and it was like, you said you're only going to do a half day, and then the dude replied like, yeah, 12 hours is half a day.
Smart.
It's smart, eh?
He's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like Lauren's to the point now. She's like, what time are you going to be home? I'm like, oh, late afternoon. What time is that? 9 o'clock? That's not late afternoon. Yeah, I've kind of exhausted all the tricks. So if anyone's got any new ones, let me know.
Yeah, same here actually. Yeah.
That's good.
It's but I think we're all the same, right? And it's because it's passion driven and you love it. So, not that I don't love my wife, but it's you kind of need it. Like, you need that escape, and we talked about it being good for mental health and that kind of thing. Like, I'm way worse. I'd rather put up with the arguments, and I'm in a better mood when I'm home than because I've had that escape or that fix than what I would be if I didn't go. And then even though I'm there, like, I'm half there because I'm thinking I should be fishing, and then you're not really in a good space.
But I mean, as a human, and I mean, we live in a very complex society now. But back in the day, our day-to-day like jobs were hunting and gathering, protecting the family. Like, that's what essentially you're designed to do. And I don't think, we're not designed to do a 9-to-5 office job or whatever,
Yeah.
We're designed to be out in the wild for the most part of it. So I think that's why, it's so important to people to get that fix and, fill their souls up with, the outdoors. It's just super important.
No, that's cool. One thing I did want to talk about too is, like, you've done the Wanganella Banks, haven't you?
Yeah. No, that was a pretty incredible experience.
You've been just the once or a couple of times?
Just the once. I was fortunate enough to. That's where I met old Brownie for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't actually caught up with him before that trip. So he was on that trip. I got the invite from the boys at Hunting and Fishing North Shore. Justin and Dave were heading up. So, like, loosely tongue in cheek said to Justin, if a spot comes up, give me a yell. And I think it's easy to say that, but then when it comes to the logistics of taking, 12 days off and departing New Zealand for that long on short notice is quite hard. But fortunately, all the stars aligned, and I had the time and could jump on the boat. And it's it's a hell of a journey because you're so far offshore. I was fortunate to go with Neil on Destiny, and he's a great skipper and very knowledgeable, and it's the adventure of a lifetime. You're closer to Norfolk Island than what you are to New Zealand. And Neil, you get up there and he's like, look, we're going to be catching a lot of big angry marlin. He's like, first and foremost, your safety's paramount. Like, don't put yourself in a position where you could get hurt because you're not in helicopter range. The closest place is probably Norfolk Island. So, you be careful. And that kind of gives you the gravity
of what's going to happen, or like where you are.
And just the anticipation, that first day, the sun's coming up, the lures are in the water, and it just set the tone for the whole trip. Just marlin like just everywhere all day. And you're driving along and you see a meatball and there's like 20 just lit up striped marlin smashing it. It's like it's a marlin fisherman's dream. And you see a lifetime's worth of fish that you would in New Zealand in a few days. I think we got 95 marlin for the 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Had a couple of crazy things happen on the trip. I think it was the second day, Justin fell over. He's like, my hip. And anyway, like in true Kiwi bloke fashion, harden up your pussy, you'll be right, walk it off.
Yeah.
And anyway, for that day, he sort of sat the rest of the day out, pretty ginger, pretty tender. And then the next day he actually got up. He caught one or two marlin. Maybe caught one marlin and leaded a couple. And then he was just out for the rest of the trip. Like just man down. So we ended up staying for an extra day. So he couldn't really do much. And then, even when we got back, like he was still really sore. And I'm like, man, I was like, you need to go, like, and I drove him home. I was like, man, you need to go to the doctor. Like, don't sleep. Don't go home and go to sleep. Like, go to the doctor. Your missus to take you. And he'd actually fractured his hip.
Oh.
Yeah. And so like crazy that he caught a marlin and leaded a couple. But the doctor actually said to him that if that fracture had like gone through and his hip had broken, like he could have like bled out there.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, like it could have been like a really life-threatening injury. So he was incredibly lucky. And then we kind of the fishing was so good, and we overstayed our welcome a little bit. We fished an extra day. The weather was good there, and then we had just horrendous weather coming back around the top of New Zealand. Like 5 meter swells. It was big.
Yeah.
And
because Wanganellas, are they like northwest of New Zealand?
Yeah, they are.
Like past the King's Day, is it? Do you go past the King's?
We fished the King Bank. We got a marlin on the way up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we stopped there on the way up, and then took a line for the Wanganellas, and it's like 300 nautical miles
from the King Bank.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh no, sorry, from the top of New Zealand.
From the
top of New Zealand. So
yeah.
Maybe that's 250 nautical miles. Yeah. That's still a long way. So it's
So is it like 72 hours to get there or something like that? Is it?
Destiny does. I think we're doing about 5-6 knots.
Yeah.
The going was good, but if you had a big current, like I think going over the Rianga Ridge, we had like a lot of current on the nose, so you might go down to like 4 knots, 3 knots. Yeah, the current could really, really slow you up.
Mm.
But I was asleep that morning as that weather hit, and I heard one wave hit the boat, and like a big boat, 70 foot. I think it was an ex-Australian seiner, so big boat, and just like the whole boat like reverberated,
Yeah.
Like that kind of woke me up, and I'm lying there. You feel like the boat rocking on quite aggressively, and then boom again. I'm like, holy! I was like, all right. So it sounds pretty serious, and I climbed up, and I went up to where Neil was, just in the wheelhouse, and looked around, and it's just like mountainous white water just tipping over, and I kind of tongue cheek was like, oh, it's a bit rough, isn't it? He was like, why are you saying that? And like when like he was obviously very serious and in the moment, and then I was like, for Neil to be showing this level of seriousness, it's pretty damn rough.
Mm.
As we got to the Kings, then around the corner was a big sou'wester. There was a big low that had gone down the bottom of the Tasman Sea. So as we came around, it sort of came right. But it was big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was real big.
Yeah. Wasn't the trip that you got a heap of yellowfin in the rough weather on the way
I think that
back?
was a trip before.
Oh, yeah.
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 But I think
that was the same thing though, It was really rough and they got on a pitch yellowfin, but then they couldn't go back because the sea was too rough. They just caught the ones that jumped on the way past.
Yeah, you couldn't have turned around in this.
No.
Yeah, like if you're in a little boat, you probably would have sunk and died.
5
meter swells are huge.
Oh, yeah.
It's like moving hills.
2 meter swell's huge. When you look at it. Yeah.
I think people underestimate swell a lot. It's 3 to 4 meters today. But when you're actually in 4 meters, 5 meters, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was that big easterly that come through the start of this year, and there was like 4 meter, 5 meter seas up north. And I was staying at Hihi in Doubtless Bay, and then looking, we're tucked in around the corner where Hihi is there by like Monganui, and you're looking the opposite way that the swell's going, and there's like 1.5 2 meter waves breaking on the beach there, and you think, well, we're in the opposite direction of the swell, and you're looking out at the swells going in the bay, and they're like houses like rolling through.
Yeah, that was just like big and tipping over, so they were quite close together. But you get those days out on the ocean when you're in a swell that big, and they're just like massive, long, rolling hills, eh?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I fished the 9-pin trench this year with Bonds, and it was like a big night, like a big glassy 1.8, 2 meter swell, and then just going up the swells, and my little boat was like, it felt like we were standing up.
Yeah.
Like just going up, and you're like, oh, we got to go over this one yet? You sort of look around, and you're like, oh, that was a big hill.
We did a trip, it was last year, in my mate's extreme little game king that he's got, and we ended up at the fingers off, like right up towards the Kings, and it was like 4 to 5 meters, but glassy calm, but still super unsettling with the size of the waves. Like you're just going up mountains. You're like, this is not a place for this little boat. I mean, the forecast was perfect. Like you'd never go that far if it was terrible, but still, you're like, man, like if this changed, you'd be in a world of hurt. In a little boat.
Yeah, I've had a couple of days like that.
Yeah, and these boats now are incredible, like the range, how far you can go, but you also need to be sensible.
Yeah, well, that's the one good thing about my boat is that it's super stable. Like, and it's like a little cork. So as long as you're not reckless and you, like, I'm always looking at the forecast, but there's still moments that you can't control, and it's going to get rough. At some point in time, you're going to get a surprise front come through. And I've had like a couple of those, and the boat, it just bobs and that with the sea, and you can kind of, as long as you take your time and you've got your wits about you, you're sweet. But if you get a bit reckless and you panic, that's when you get into trouble. Yeah, that's it. And those dangerous sort of situations, you definitely don't want panic to set in, because people just don't think rationally, and it just can turn to custard pretty quickly. Yeah. And you do see some, you kind of see the true character of people when you get in those dire situations sometimes, when it... Yeah, and I mean, the ocean's a very unsettling place for someone that's not used to it. It's very, I mean, for someone that's been, spent all their life on land, you put them out of sight of land, or you put them in some rough ocean, it's just totally foreign to them, So you can understand why, they get that fear aspect pretty quickly. I remember once when we were young, like, just never do it now, like, just totally reckless. But we're going to the barrier for a fishing competition, and we were leaving like the North Shore in Auckland there out to the barrier, and it was 30 knots from the northeast with a 2 meter swell. And this is like back in the day when like the GPSs were like super like just unreliable and not good. And we'd borrow I think we were 18, and we'd borrowed my mate's dad's boat, like a 6 meter fire in. And we're just too keen, like, we'll just go it. And like 6 hours to get across, and we're getting most of the way across. And my mate that I was with was like, I can't do it anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, just freaking out. He's like, you have to drive the boat. And I was like, okay, sweet. But that was that situation. Like, you're in the middle of the Gulf. It's rough as anything. You're in a 6 meter boat, and you kind of just have to, you just got to keep going, Yeah. And it's pitch black, and the GPS clapped out, so that wasn't working. And it was pretty, like, I mean, looking back on it, it's pretty scary. So we were picking our way between the Channel light and then the Fitzroy light. Like, that way's land. And I mean, the good thing was like a nor'easterly, so the closer we got, the calmer it was going to get. But like 6 hours, pretty much all in the pitch black to the barrier. And we eventually got there, and I don't know what time of night it was, but there was a boat heading north. So we tucked them behind it, and we're like, look, our GPS isn't working. Can we follow you wherever you're going? So and luckily they were going into Fitzroy. So we managed to tuck them behind them and get into Fitzroy. Far out.
Yeah, and then going into Fitzroy, just the most incredible like lightning and thunderstorm. Like,
oh, real.
Like every probably 15 seconds, just like lightning. Like it felt biblical, And we're in this little.
Like, we're in heaven.
Yeah, it didn't feel like heaven. It felt like hell. But we get around into Fitzroy, and we anchor up for the night, and we woke up in the morning, and like Fitzroy Harbour was just chocolate brown from all the rain, and just full of logs. Like there'd been that much rain that it just washed all
trees and stuff down. Yeah.
So we could only do 5 knots to get out of Fitzroy, and it was like dum 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 dum.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're just so. I mean, it was incredible.
The fishing was good.
Yeah, we went up the coast. We went up to Miners Coast, and we caught a heap of snapper. And then the forecast was for a southeasterly. So we thought that we could stay in. There were a few other boats in there, actually. So I think everyone had the same thing. They would stay in Miners Cove for the night, southeasterly. It's kind of pretty much offshore there, so you'd be nice and sheltered. And then I don't know what time that morning, like 1 o'clock in the morning, looking out of the cove, you're kind of looking out towards the moats, I guess, and you just see lightning and thunderstorm, and it's coming back, like the weather's supposed to be coming from the southeast, and this thing's like marching in, and then we probably had 30 knots in that little cove. I mean, you can't go anywhere. We would have had to go on back down to Fitzroy. So we just sat on, one of us would sleep for an hour and the other one of us would sit on the helm ready to start the engine if the anchor dragged so we could get out of there.
Yeah.
Because we're pumping straight in there, so it'd be a one stop, quick straight into the rocks. But yeah, again, the next day just dawned perfectly calm. It was an absolute emotional roller coaster, that trip.
Yeah.
Full character building.
Yeah. You're still good mates with the guy you're with?
Oh, best mate.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You still give him stick about giving up the wheel halfway across?
I don't think you can give anyone stick for that because it's
a pretty heavy situation, right?
Yeah, I guess the gravity of it's pretty significant. Like you are in I wouldn't say we're in a life or death situation, but you're in a situation that you have to push it.
Could turn that way though, right?
And if you it's just fortunate that, and the same thing, if I was in his position and I sketched out, I'd be super thankful if he was there to pick up, from where I left off and get us through safely. But, he's an awesome dude. Do heaps of crazy missions with him. I think even before that, we did another trip, another fishing comp, just too keen to get to the barrier. And we got caught out there in the fire end. And it was 40 knots gusting 50 knots with 60 knot squalls.
Whoa.
Yeah. You can hear the wind coming.
Yeah. And
it was only a soft top fryer and blew that the canopy to shreds. So we had to shelter in. We were fine because we were in the Broken Islands and Fitzroy.
Yeah.
So we just had to shelter in Fitzroy and let the storm blow through. But had to call collect from the Fitzroy phone and call our parents and be like, man, we're stuck at the barrier.
Can't get back.
Do you accept a collect call from Scott Malcon? I'm stuck out at the barrier. Oh, just too keen to go fishing.
Yeah.
But from all that, you learn and, I think the forecasts and stuff are a lot better now. The safety equipment. For those offshore missions, I've bought a life raft and you have your EPIRB and you just don't take any chances.
Yeah.
You get a bit more sensible as you get a bit older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a guy I want to do a podcast with, Ross Chapman. Have you heard of Ross? And, he's a Kiwi guy and he was working over in Perth in the mines and used to do a heap of blue marlin fishing out there, and he just got a trailer boat and he was out fishing solo and he went overboard, no life jacket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this GoPro fell off his head and he went to grab it and then slipped over. He just caught a blue marlin. He might have caught 2 or 3 that morning already. And then, his GoPro fell off his head and he went to grab it and went in and ended up grabbing the line on the rod, pulled out all 1,000 metres till he got to the knot and, did a couple of mad dashes to the boat to try and get on, and then the line ended up snapping. And, I think he spent 6.5 or 9.5 hours at sea. No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they found his boat and then backtracked the GPS and found the rough kind of area that they thought he would have gone over, and they grid searched and found him. Pretty
How lucky is that?
Yeah. Bonds calls him the ghost.
The ghost?
Yeah.
Accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. But no life jacket, just in boardies, that was it.
It's far out.
Crazy,
a good swimmer, eh?
Yeah. So, pretty heavy sort of scenario to be in.
It'd be nothing worse.
No.
It would feel like all hope was lost. But again, testament to that dude's will to live, eh?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But, I mean, there's, if you are going solo fishing, strap one of those little PLBs to yourself and, you can eliminate, a bit of the risk.
Yeah.
Still wouldn't be nice being in the water, but at least, someone could find you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done a little bit of solo fishing, and I've kind of made it a bit of a quest or a journey to catch a marlin solo.
Yeah, awesome.
I hooked 14 before I got one. Yeah, number 14 was the one I landed, but yeah, I'd always go. It wasn't because it got to a point. It wasn't because I couldn't find crew. It was because I was purposely trying to catch one on my own. So like mates would be going out, and instead of jumping on with them, I'd be like, "Oh, bro, I'll take my boat," because I knew they were going to be there and we'd fish around the same area, and they'd help me launch and whatnot. So yeah, but now I've ticked that box. I'm like, no, it's way better fishing with mates.
I was going to say, I would have felt good to tick it though.
Yeah, it did. It did. Like it was a hell of a. Yeah, I guess because I think the very first day I did it, I hooked one, and I was just like, oh man, I can do this. But then 3.5 years later, maybe before I finally did it, and 14 fish later, I lost in 2 trips. I fished one day off Whangaroa, I lost 4 in one day before 11:30, and then I told the missus I'll be home at 12, and it was 11:30, and I just lost the 4th one. So I thought, I'll just give her a ring, and hopefully she'll be like, oh no, it's all right, the fishing's hot, to stay there, try and catch one. And she was like, oh well, you better get home now. So I was like, oh well, end of that conversation. So I shot in, and then the next trip out, I went out down here in Raglan. When we got home, went out and lost another 4. So I lost 8 in 2 days fishing.
See, I mean, there's a good lesson though. If she let you keep fishing for that rest of the afternoon, you could have ticked the box earlier.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I told her. Instead, it went on for another 12 months.
Yeah.
I think it was the next year. Yeah, I finally ticked the box.
Yeah. That's wicked though.
Yeah.
Good fish?
Probably 100 kilos.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, not a real big one, but
yeah.
I was
a handful on your own.
Yeah, it was. And to be fair, like it couldn't have played out any better. Like Glamour Day, beautiful weather. The fish come in sort of first thing, got them on. It was real good to me. Flat, calm sea, obviously, so I could get all the gear out of the way, and the boat was just ticking and idle forward. I didn't have autopilot then either, so that was a handful in itself, sort of running back and forth on the rod and then it didn't give me a hiding at the boat either. It came up nicely, and and then got a tag in it and let it go. So it was pretty cool to be able to let it go too,
Yeah.
Like I was, I was always gonna let it go. I told myself if I got one solo that I was gonna let it go. So it was good that come up healthy and let it swim.
It's funny how you set yourself like, if I do that, I'll let it go. Or, And like, I think with my first 20 pounder, I was like, I'll keep my first one and I'll get it mounted, and then I'll let every other one go after that,
Yeah.
And it's funny how you set yourself little goals like that, You feel like if you maybe sacrifice letting it go, it'll happen earlier.
Yeah. I reckon that's what I was going for. A bit of karma. Let it go, and then it'll get, the marlin gods will give me a fish.
If you let me catch a fish today, I promise to let it go.
Yeah.
I promise.
I think we've all had that conversation, And either in our head or out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's universal amongst fishermen.
Yeah. That was the one thing because I caught 120 pounder. I was 11 when I got it. And I didn't have the money to mount it, and I took it home, wrapped it, put it in the freezer, and tried to save my money to mount it. But then it ended up getting real bad freezer burn, and then I couldn't mount it. So I was like, like when I look back at it now, I'm like gutted because that fish lost its life, and then I didn't even pay it justice by either eating it or putting it on the wall. But then, it was. And I reckon that's why I've never caught another one since.
It's funny, my first 20 pounder lived a similar life.
Yeah.
Through a couple of flats and a few different freezers.
Oh,
Back at Mum's freezer, yeah. I had it for a few years before I could afford to get it mounted. And I got a fiberglass mount. Probably would have been no good for a skin mount. But still managed to get it mounted. But it travelled with me around a bit.
Yeah. Well, I think Dad just got sick of it being in his freezer, my one, and must have tipped it out.
Axed it.
Yeah, chucked it out somewhere.
Well, that's our case.
My Saltiga lever drag turned up the other day.
Yeah, Brownie got one too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he's like, oh, my Saltiga turned up.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's like globally, they're probably the biggest struggle is componentry. particular guides or
Yeah.
whatever. So, I mean, these factories, albeit it's a Daiwa factory, but they get the guides from Fuji or they get the guides from Sea Guide. So, there's a lot of moving parts in that sense. And then, they've got to make the product. And there's these increased volumes where everyone's buying shitloads more product. And now, so there's all those challenges. Then shipping, you've got to get your product on a ship. Takes, I guess the time it takes for the ship to move is fine. But then it gets here. It's got to get through the port. It's got to get to our warehouse, unpacked. And I think our warehouse at the moment, just through COVID and close contacts, it's working at about 60% capacity.
Yeah.
Same with like the Korean network.
Yeah.
So it's just taking so long to get it into stock. And then once you're there and you've got the orders, then you've got to send it out. And then it's got to go back on the courier network. And the courier network in New Zealand is just toast at the moment.
Yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
Oh, man, it's just an absolute nightmare. And then the cost of everything's going up too. Raw materials. So, yeah, it's a challenging environment to be selling stuff. But I mean, we're fortunate that people are trapped in New Zealand, so they fish.
Yeah.
That's what people can do. And up until this point in time, the fishing market's been super buoyant, really, really good. But
Fuel prices hasn't seemed to have slowed people down.
Yeah, never. I mean, people have probably saved a lot of money on not travelling and whatever else. And I mean, you might be the same, but working from home, you're not like I'm not going up for like 2 coffees in Parnell a day. I'm not going up and having lunch. You know. And by the time you add that up over the course of a week and 4 weeks and 6 months and however long we are now, it makes a bit difference. So you do get a little bit more money in the pocket that you can spend on gas and that. But, I mean, Auckland, $3.10 a litre. That hurts. But you change your fishing, where, I might have gone to the barrier, tried to get to the barrier every time I fish, I might just fish a bit more local. Yeah. Fish Kawa or fish Little Barrier. Fish somewhere else.
I've never fished at the barrier.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There's a lot of marlin there, in the Nationals. Off the back there.
We got a marlin there the other day.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, off the back. Pretty lucky. We were fishing with Neil from Destiny.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's a marlin. I just saw a marlin cruising down that wave. We're like, most people are like, oh, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But how many marlins that dude seen? Turned the boat around. I didn't see it the second time. They're like, you're going to run it over. So I turned a bit more and then kept going. Those fish you hardly ever get back up. And came up straight in the lures.
Yeah.
Off you go.
Yeah.
Nailed it. And it wasn't actually even hooked. It was, those light gauge hooks.
Yeah.
Like the hook had come around and hadn't penetrated the bill, but then the other hook and the wire had kind of like cinched it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like...
I caught one like Hokey last year.
Yeah, the hook wasn't even in it.
Yeah.
So like I just flicked the hook off to get it off and then see you later. Yeah, incredible, Just that wire had just wrapped around tight enough.
Yeah, just held them on.
And it came up tail wrap, mustn't have been tail wrap for long. And that popped straight off. And then when I had it in the leader front, I pulled it in quite quick. But it must have, been on there reasonably tight because it just didn't slide off.
Yeah.
You can see how a lot of fish just slide off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the beauty of like the technique and stuff that Bond's, I suppose, been sharing with people, like staying behind the fish and the rest of it. Yeah, because I caught 2 or 3 last year that went hooked. Yeah. And just purely from just staying behind it, but the traditional way of how, like my mate's old man drives on them, that he fights the fish here and just drives away from it the whole time. So as soon as you don't have it hooked, you're just going to pull the hook straight off it. And they lose heaps. Yeah, and that's why. And I was like, mate, if you just stay behind it, but can't get his head around it, can't change his mind.
It's funny, but Ben Brown or Neil or one of those boys that's done a bit more, we might be able to talk to it a bit better. But it was funny, like at the Wanganellas, if the rod tip's like, if the marlin was boosting and the rod tip's like vibrating, like he's just not hooked properly.
Oh yeah.
And most of the time, those fish would just fall off.
Yeah.
So those going.
Yeah.
Like not hooked, but if it's like the rod's loaded and line's going, then he's hooked properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre, So I don't know what the
difference
science
was
behind that rod. Like,
I wonder what that is.
I don't know.
Yeah, because normally like I watch and if it bites and then it comes down, it's like and it goes, and then if it's like but if I see like nod, then I'm like, oh, I've got him hooked, and it'll go bop, and then if it runs again, then I know I've got him on. But if it goes bop, and then it's like, and then normally it'll be bop, gone, and they're just like shaking their head and then they're off. Or if it just tears off and it doesn't shake its head, then I'm like, and it's probably vibrating, but I haven't noticed that part yet. I'm like, oh, I haven't got it hooked, so I'll back the drag off, slow the boat straight away, and then turn around, try and stay behind it.
Yeah.
And then I've caught three last year like that. One I was just like, fuck. I was like, oh, like quickly went over and I was just watching it, and I backed the drag off. I was like, we haven't got a hook, but we'll catch it. And I was like, hey, you reckon? I was like, yeah, we'll just stay behind it. And then, sure enough, stayed behind it, caught it for just over an hour.
Yeah.
And then got up to it. But it was a weird fight. Like, hardly any jumps. And when it did jump, it wasn't really jumping. It was more just like thrashing its head around, almost like rolling around.
Yeah.
And it just stayed like 10 meters under the surface the whole time. And I'd just get up to it, and then it would just boost off, and then it would just cruise around. It was like it was feeding or still trying to actively feed. It was going in all these weird directions. It wasn't like tracking down sea or up sea or whatever. It would just be like going this way and be following it. We'd get up to it. Next minute's going that way. Then get over and then it's going that way and then back this way. And it was just,
Well, what was the hook like?
just like straight over the top of the bill like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Crazy,
Yeah. No, nothing in it at all.
Nothing
like just
left.
when it came up, I just like grabbed it by the bill and then the hook just like fell off it.
Oh, wow.
So it was literally just like that.
Yeah.
And then
It's a good effort, eh?
Yeah, grabbed the bill, like it came outside I had it, leader pulled it in, and then like because my boat's so little, you can like pull yourself to them quite quick.
Yeah,
so I just like boop, grabbed his bill, and then as I like grabbed his bill and let go of the leader, it just fell off and then the lure, and like I was like, oh yeah, we got it. I was like, look, it wasn't hooked, and then they're like, what? And I was like, look, the lure's back there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like trailing us in the water.
Let's work it out.
Yeah.
You got to take the occasional lucky break.
Oh yeah, fuck the amount of times you don't get.
I hate to think how many fish I hooked before I caught my first one.
Yeah, that's probably us, eh? Like we've covered a fair bit of
I don't think we want to bore anyone too much.
a few more fishing tales.
With wild fishing adventures of the stupid things you did when you were younger.
Yeah. Nice. It was wicked having you on, Scotty, and it was cool for me personally to get a little bit more background to not only yourself but also the brand of Daiwa, and I suppose the direction it's been. And from an outsider looking in, it's been quite cool to see the transformation and the transition. And I love the content that you guys are creating through your marketing and the work that you've been doing with the awesome content creators that you do have. So it's been cool for me to learn a lot.
No, I appreciate that. No, it's it's a cool journey, and it's great to finally get down here and get to have a chat with you. I mean, we've been planning it for long enough, and there's been no shortages of challenges. So I appreciate it.
One thing I will say is that I'm going to be doing a bit of work with Daiwa now also, so we're going to be getting a lot of these names and stuff that we mentioned throughout the podcast and getting them on to share their, I suppose, their expertise and their tips and tricks and their mindset around fishing and how they treat it. So that'll be cool.
Looking forward to hearing a few of the boys get on here and go through their stories. I mean, you can learn so much about people as well. Podcasts are great.
Yeah, it's wicked. Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much, Scotty.
Cool, man. Thank you.